Hey all, hope the quarantine is going well. Welcome to another edition of AP QuarantinEnglish. Today we're going to be taking a look at a poem for Poetry Tuesday. The poem is called The Second Coming by William Butler Yeats. It was written in 1919, published in 1920, soon after both World War I and the Spanish flu epidemic. I thought perhaps the flu and pandemics and quarantines would be appropriate. So it was written during that time period. Let's take a look.
The Second Coming by William Butler Yeats. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. The second coming. Hardly are those words out when a vast image of spiritus mundi troubles my sight. Somewhere in the sands of the desert, a shape with lion body and head of a man, a gaze blank and pitiless as the sun, is moving its slow thighs, while all about it reel shadows of the indignant desert birds. The darkness drops again. But now I know that 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle. And what rough beast, its hour come at last, slouches toward Bethlehem to be born? Now you can see that this poem really shouldn't look like this. It should look more like this. It is absolutely apocalyptic, right? We look at this turning and turning in the widening gyre. A gyre is a spiral or a vortex. The falcon cannot hear the falconer, right? So here we have a falconer is a guy who calls to a falcon, but as that falcon goes around further and further, he gets so far away that he can no longer hear. And it's an interesting thing. You'll notice that we have a falcon and a falconer, and the subject of that sentence is falcon. So it's the bird, the one who is being called, who's the one doing the action, and the one that's the focus. And if we look at this as a representative sort of phrase, the falcon is people, civilization, and the falconer is what holds it together. But because people can't hear whatever is in the center, right, things fall apart. And that center doesn't hold. The question is, what is that center? And given the religious imagery later on in this poem and in the title, it's likely a religious, perhaps Christian center, but it could also be a moral or philosophical center. The point is that, right, the center doesn't hold if people can no longer hear. So the next line, it says, mere anarchy is loosed upon the world, right? And remember, this is written soon after World War I, written during the Spanish flu pandemic. Yeats' wife had the flu when he wrote this. The word mere suggests kind of, normal commonplace, right? It's just anarchy. And it suggests that if we were to see more anarchy, it would be just like the last, that it's become, pure and simple anarchy, and it wouldn't be surprised if it came back. Spoiler alert, it does come back with World War II. Anyway, we see that mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The word loosed is used twice, which... usually that word, it means to set loose. It could be used in hunting. You loose the dogs to go get whatever animal you're hunting. Or here it seems more like a flood, because we have the blood-dimmed tide loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned, right? Which we have this flood, a bloody flood loosed in the world. Which I think really is reference to World War I and all of the anarchy and chaos and violence in Europe. But, with the Christian and religious allusions in this poem, talking about the innocence, right? Ceremony of innocence is drowned. Can't help me think of Noah's Ark, which, while for some reason we tell the story of Noah's Ark to children, right? It's really the story of the destruction and drowning of all of humanity, and is pretty anarchic and chaotic, really, right? It's pretty violent. All right. The last line, the best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. And we can kind of take that one of two ways. Either, the best lack all conviction is to say that the best are spineless, right? The best of us in this were spineless to do anything about it. We couldn't do it, while the worst were the ones full of passionate intensity, which I think is certainly something we understand. The other way to look at it is that because existence is ambiguous, the best struggle with that ambiguity, right? And so they lack the conviction to just say, this is right, this is wrong, whereas the worst do see the world in black and white, and have passionate intensity based on that. All right, second stanza. Ooh, sorry for highlighting that indignant desert birds. We start off, surely some revelation is at hand, surely the second coming is at hand, the second coming, right? And the repetition of second coming and the use of revelation is a reference to the story from Revelation in the Bible, right? Is the second coming of Christ. And so it starts off with this hope, that will end the anarchy. But, and here's a big but here, hardly are those words out when a vast image of Spiritus Mundi troubles my sight. And Spiritus Mundi, for all of you who are not Latin scholars, means spirit of the world, mundi, world. So it's an image out of the spirit of the world, not an image out of Spiritus Sanctus, right, or a holy image, or a Holy Spirit, but instead out of the people, right? These are the same people who caused the anarchy earlier. But that troubles my sight. Somewhere in the sands of the desert, a shape with lion body and head of a man, right, which we know is the Sphinx. And that was a completely inappropriate animation there. A gaze blank and pitiless as the sun is moving its slow eyes, while all about it real shadows of the indignant desert birds, right, which would be vultures. So, killing in its wake. Those birds, feast on the carrion. So the darkness drops again. But now I know that 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to a nightmare by a rocking cradle. Right? So it's talking about sleep. That darkness is, sleep is coming again. But the 20 centuries of relative peace that we've had have been turned into a nightmare. And in Europe they call World War I the Great War for a reason. It had been the most bloody and violent war that they'd had. And what rough beast its hour come round at last slouches toward Bethlehem to be born. And it's that Bethlehem is a reference to the place of Jesus' birth. And so the second coming then, not really being a second coming of Christ, but more of an antichrist. And this apocalyptic sort of idea that, with World War I, with the Spanish flu pandemic and the anarchy there, that it's not, people aren't going to be saved, but it's only going to get worse. And, what's coming may in fact be worse than what had been there. A little prophetic, right? Because we know that World War II comes. And, certainly that rough beast in World War II was slouching towards Bethlehem, right? And certainly destroyed lots of Europe in its wake. So there's our happy poem for the day. I thought I would do something dealing with quarantine and the Spanish flu. And this is a poem that was written out of that hard time in our history. So, till next time, happy Poetry Tuesday.